warfare going on. Even though we can't see it, the great invisible war. And we spent the last few weeks talking about warfare in our relationships, warfare in our minds, distractions, schemes, strategies, how the enemy wants to destroy the church, how the enemy wants to destroy marriages, how the enemy wants to anything regarding Jesus Christ. He just wants to destroy it and demolish it. And because you wear the name Christian, you have a big bullseye on your back. And for years and years and years, all the way to the very beginning, the enemy is destroying those who represent Jesus Christ. And one of the things that we have been learning, and I want to underline today, is that there is nothing that you can bring to the table to do battle against the enemy on your own. If you try to wage war against the enemy in your own strength, you will lose every time. However, when we come in the name of the Lord, you are not just who you are with yourself. You come with all the power that comes from heaven itself. Let me give you an example. One of the greatest stories, and I look and talk to these brothers from time to time, and one of them is David. Me and David, sometimes when things are just kind of going bad and tough, and I just need a little kick in the pants, and need a little courage, and need a little boost, we have a conversation. 2 Samuel 27:45 says this: when Goliath blasphemed and challenged the Jehovah of Israel, David came and said to him, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord God of the hosts of Israel, whom you have defiled." That young man knew that there's no way that I can do battle against this giant. However, I have power, not in my own abilities, but in God Himself. And the thing that David did that was so smart and so wise, even at a young age, is he went to the battlefield saying, "Look, I can't come to you and beat you, but the God behind me that gives me strength and gives me power, I can take out." And there are some giants in our lives that we face, and you can't do it. We talked about it 2 weeks ago when we talked about strongholds, the giants that wage war against you. And we learned that there's no way that we can wage war against the giants in our lives, against the enemy, the schemes of the enemy, in our own strength. We must, like David, come in the name of the Lord. True Christian strength is not of the body or even the mind. True Christian strength is of the Spirit, measured in faithfulness, trust, and perseverance. In the book of Ephesians, we are not encouraged to take up the full armor of God. We are commanded to take the full armor of God. You're not going to be encouraged and say, "Hey, look, you should," if you're going to debate that and wage war and then fall short every time. Paul knew that his brothers and his sisters, his Christian family, could not wage war in their own strength. Thus, he made that a command. These verses that we're about to look at in Ephesians chapter 6, they are our command. These verses are marching orders, and we dare not ignore them or fail to carry them out to the letter. And so when we're getting ready to get into Ephesians 6, I want all of us to understand the value and the importance, because you don't get to choose if you want to be in a war or not. You decided that when you said, "Listen, I'm going to follow Jesus Christ with my heart, my mind, my soul, my strength. He is my leader, and wherever He says, I will go." And when you signed your name on the dotted line to say, "I want to be a child of God, I want to wear the name Christians," You were drafted into that war. And so you are part. And so we can either be a part and make a difference, or we can sit on the sidelines just kind of watching our lives having no impact at all. So these words are marching orders. Why? 1 Peter 5, 8 through 9 says this, be alert and be sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. It's important that Peter gives the image of a lion, because the lion is looking. He's on the warpath. He's looking to see who he's going to devour. And if you all know a little bit about how the animal kingdom works, especially with the lions, you know who they're looking for? They're looking for the weak. Why? Because they're a little bit slower. They're not going to keep up pace. And so they're looking for the one that's going to fall behind. And that lion is going to want to go and take them out. And so it's imperative. And what Paul was trying to say is, look, don't be weak. You're giving everything that you need to be strong and to be a part and to be God's champion. God is calling for champions today. We read about Paul. We read about David. We read about these great champions for the Lord. But guess what? They live their life. They've done the things that God has asked them to do. God is looking for new champions to stand up and wave that flag and say, look, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We are moving forward. We're not moving backwards. We want to be a part. We want to be change agents. We're going to be changed and transformed into His image. Why? Because changed people change the world. So he goes on in verse 9 and says, resist him. Because we know the lion is looking around and he's watching, he's looking, and he just doesn't want to look at you. It says he wants to devour you. It says resist him. Stand firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same sufferings. Even at that time, Paul was writing to, look, it's not just you. It's not just you. It's the world. It's those who wear the name Jesus Christ. And even today, that is true. Today, it is you, it is me. All around this world, we wage war with the enemy. So Paul was not only led to describe our enemy in Ephesians 6, but also to teach us how we can be prepared for the battle that rages. He looks up and sees a Roman soldier. There were steel guards on his feet and in his shins. And there was a breastplate. There was a helmet. There was the girdle, which was a strong belt to hold all in place. And there was the shield and the sword, and it made an impression upon the apostle. So he took that and he applied it to the equipment of the soldier of the cross. That's you and me. And so I want to read Ephesians 6. And a few weeks ago when we started this, I went into detail, verses 10 through 12. So I want to read through that, and then I really want to take some time and get into the armor, God's armor, that He has for us. Finally, be strong in the Lord and His mighty power. Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and against authorities and against powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. And Paul writes that we must put the full armor of God in order to stand. Now, upon doing some research for the sermon that we did a few weeks ago, that the verse that we just read, looking back at it and preparing for this, something struck me, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, but I'm going to say it anyways, that I was impacted, and really for the first time was so very aware when it said, put the full armor of God on. It says, put the full armor. Not just a couple pieces, or not just this piece over here, or the ones that I want to work on. He says, you need to put the full armor of God. It's God's armor that he's telling you that you need to put on. And as a matter of fact, you don't get to choose some of them. You need to have all of it on. And I believe that at times, we don't think that way. We just want to put on some, or we don't really think that deep, or really understand how critical the war is and all the weaponry that the enemy have. So we just kind of, we half-heartedly think through these things. And Paul's saying, hey, listen, that's not the type of war that you're in. It is a major war, and you have to be prepared. You have to be protected. And there's some equipment that God has for you, but you need to put it all on. Amen. Not just a couple pieces. Because the devil's been doing this a long time. And if you just have a couple pieces, he's like, that's cool. I won't attack there because I can take you out over here. So it's not enough for us just to give God just enough of ourselves. Just to show that we're a soldier. We're a soldier because we have a helmet and maybe a shield. And maybe a sword. He wants you to be protected. Why? Because you carry his name to the world. Put the full armor of God in order to stand. That was the second thing. I'm like, whoa. That means if I don't put the full armor of God, I won't be able to stand. Because he says, put the full armor in order to stand. So listen to this. If you don't have it all on, I'm going to say it. It's not the proper word, but I'm going to say it anyways. If you don't have the proper armor on, you ain't standing. You ain't standing. That's not me. That's not me. That's what Paul's saying. And if anybody knew, it was him.
That's right.
Verse 13, therefore, because of the great enemy that you're going against, the craftiness and the schemes that he can do. Therefore, put the full armor, again, of God, so that when the day of evil comes, and it will, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you've done everything to stand, stand firm. So he says this, we are to stand against the schemes of the devil. He says this, we are to stand our ground. And you ready for this one? And not give an inch. Whoa. Let me chew on my fingernails a little bit. So I need to stand and not give any ground. That's right. That's what happens when we wear the full armor of God on. When we're giving inches and we're moving backwards and backwards and backwards, something's out of place. Maybe you drop something. It's imperative that you get it fixed. Because what Paul's saying is when you are armored up and prepared, you can take your place, make your stand, and not go backwards.
That's right.
Now, when we do go backwards, and it happens, thank you for God's grace and his mercy and his love, his unconditional love. You know what he'll do? If you allow him, he'll pick that up and place it where it needs to be and prepare you for battle again.
That's right.
We need to have it all on in order to stand. So we are to stand against the schemes of the devil. We are to stand our ground and not give an inch. And we are to stand firm and keep standing. Not just when I feel good, not after we just had, a great service, or I heard a great sermon on the radio, or I just wake up and, sometimes you just wake up and you're like, oh, I feel good. Like we've felt here lately when we wake up and the sun's just waking us up and we're like, I see nothing but blue skies. We can't say, Lord, I can't stand today because it's raining again. That don't work. Matter of fact, maybe I feel that way, but I'll never say it. But hey, sometimes that's how we are. We let our emotions drive the type of day we're going to have. And if our emotions are driving and says, look, I don't really feel good, I'm just going to give myself a day off of standing firm and living right. We laugh at that, but you know what? Somewhere in our minds, our soul, our thinking, sometimes we do it. But maybe I'm the only one. It says we are to stand firm and keep standing. Every day we battle. Every single day. If we have a good day, a good week, a good month, we don't get to take some time off. We don't get to say, hey, look, I've been working hard for a while. I'm going to take my normal vacation. There is no vacation in the spiritual world. The enemy's been doing this a long time, and he will wait, and he will wait, and he will be patient until you let your guard down. And then he will attack. We are to stand firm and keep standing. Our duty is not to attack Satan, however, or to defeat him, but rather to withstand his attacks. I hear all the time, and I used to be that way as well. I think I can do battle against the enemy, and man, if he comes up against me, man, he better watch out. You can't go up against the enemy. You're not called to go up against the enemy. You're called to keep standing, not to go back. We read in Job chapter 1 about, we get a description of how things kind of work in the spiritual world. And we know that Job was blameless, upright. He feared God and he shunned evil. We know that about him, that he was a blameless and he was like no one else. Well, we also know that God put a hedge of protection around him. And the enemy says, look, yeah, he's blameless, he's all that because he keeps you keep a hedge of protection around him. But guess what? If you take that hedge out, we can do some business. And so we know that God said, okay, you take that, well, I'll take that hedge out. You just can't take him out. And we know that all hell broke loose in Job's life. But nowhere do you see Job just going toe-to-toe with the enemy. Nowhere do you know what you see Job do? Say statements like this. I know my Redeemer liveth. You know what that means? I am standing firm. I'm not going backwards. When everybody said, curse God and die, curse God and die, curse God and die, his response is standing firm. I know my Redeemer liveth.
Amen.
You don't see him trying to go after and all. You just see, that's what we're called to do. James 4:7, submit yourself to God. Resist the devil, and he will what? Flee. That's the type of battle that we do. We stand firm. We submit to God, and we resist the devil. That's the battle plan. Submit to God. Your will, your ways over to him. You fight by being submissive, by getting your marching orders from him and living out the Christian life. And when the enemy comes your way, you resist him and you stand firm. How can we do that? How can we live a life like Job, who stood firm when everything collapsed around his life? When he was able, even his wife said, curse God and die like a man. He's like, no. My Redeemer liveth. And there's going to be times in your life when all hell is breaking loose, and there's nothing you can say but this: I know my Redeemer liveth. Amen. And circumstances will never dictate how I behave or respond to God himself. So let's look at the armor. It says this in verse 14 on down. Stand firm then. Make up your mind and do it. Stand firm then. And this is how you stand. This is the armor of God. It's not your armor that you create. It's God's armor. It's God's armor. that he created for you. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all flames, the flaming arrows of the evil ones. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. The nature of our weapons tell us a great deal about the nature of war we are in. If you understand the weapons, you will understand how the enemy works. Because God has given you armor and weapons to fortify yourself and to do as he called you to do. Stand firm. It tells us the methods Satan will employ in his effort to destroy you, or as Peter says, devour you. Peter wanted to know, listen, let me think of the most ferocious animal and give that picture to you. Didn't say a dove, he didn't say an elephant, he didn't say a beaver. Just going to gnaw you to death. Did I do that? I just did that. It's a lion. Thus, to know the armor which God has provided is to know the way Satan will seek our downfall. So, let's look at God's armor we are to wear. Number one, the belt of truth, the tunic. That holds everything in place, right around the midsection. It holds everything in place, just like truth. Truth holds everything together. It is the constant that we have. It holds all of it together. And for those who do not know Jesus Christ, it is the very beginning of who he is. It is the truth that we have. John 14:6 says this, Jesus answered and said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. He is the truth. There is no other truth. There is no other way. It is him and him alone. For the believer, that is imperative, and that is the very beginning of the essence of understanding the absolute truth of Jesus Christ. And John 8:31 and 32 says this, to the Jews who have believed in him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teachings, Jesus is the truth. If you hold to my teachings, he is the way, he is the life. If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciple. Our life is to follow his life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. It is to follow his life if you are my disciples. And the byproduct of that truth that we know and then we live by is verse 32. Then you will know the truth. Byproduct is the next one. So you'll know the truth is the byproduct of 31. Then you will know the truth, the byproduct of the second half of this verse. And the truth will set you free. See how it all works together? So what's the main purpose of all that? The truth. In the midst of lies that this world gives every single day, and we know where the lies come from because I think it says in the Bible that the enemy is the father of lies. And so he wants to warp what we know to be true. He wants to warp the scriptures, the very word and the breath of God. As you buckle on this piece of God's armor, you are to live in his truth, speak his truth, display this truth to the world, to your world. And when we do this, the Bible says at the end of verse 32, we will live in freedom. We'll live in freedom. You know what the enemy loves to do? Whisper in your ear, you're not good enough. You can't be a teacher. You can't be a preacher. You can't be a mom. You can't be a dad. You can't even call yourself a Christian. And he's just condemning us, condemning us, condemning us. We need to have that truth. Jesus 3 times spoke truth to the enemy when he came to him. And listen, let me tell you this. If he's going to come to Jesus Christ and try to lie to him and sway him, he's going to come to you. Doesn't matter how long you've been a Christian. Doesn't matter how much scripture you know. I've talked about this a lot. We don't need more a belly full of Bible that just kind of sits there and gets bigger. When we eat and feed, it's to give us strength to do something. If we're not doing anything, it becomes a belly full of Bible and just sits there. There's a lot of Christians, I know. I came from the educational world. There's a lot of Christians that know a lot about the scriptures, and they don't live it.
Amen.
You don't live it, it loses its power.
That's right.
We can live in freedom, though, when we allow truth to be our guide. Breastplate of righteousness. No soldier will go into battle without his breastplate. It's a tough, sleeveless piece of armor that covers the chest to protect it against the assaults and arrows. The enemy wants to confuse our truths and thereby pervert our affections, our morals, our loyalties, and our commitment. He seeks to undermine righteous living. When we're talking about the shield, the breastplate of righteousness, we're not talking about the righteousness that is imputed unto you for salvation. We're talking about right living, the practical righteousness of God that allows us to live a holy and pure life. As Job chapter 1 says, blameless. He seeks to undermine that and replace it with immorality, greed, envy, prejudice, gossip, bitterness, and all these other vices that continue and continue and continue. And I say continue because there's so many. He can name them because he's been doing it and using these things over and over and over. And he's looking around and he's trying to see, that one's got some armor on. That one don't. That one don't. That one thinks he does. How do we know? Because it says he prowls around. How do we know? Because in Job he's like, I'm just going to and fro and looking and watching and strategizing. And for us to walk out of here and say, hey, yeah, that's cool. All right, great. We did our Sunday morning. I hate to say this, but the Bible calls us foolish. For those who walk out of here and think it's not a big deal.
That's right.
It is a big deal. And Paul loved his church family so much, he wrote these things in prison. He wanted his brothers and sisters to be able to stand and not fall prey. We here are the same. We need to stay together and stand together and not fall prey. There are people falling all around us. We try to use our own wisdom, our own intellect, our own logic, but we must know that all those things, they don't work. They fail in comparison to the truth that God has for us. You see, this is important because this protects our vitals. If he can penetrate your vitals to the core of who you are, he will do some damage. And we all know and have probably been where we've taken some massive hit to our vitals. And that drop us to our knees. It is the breastplate of righteousness that protects us. You see, the enemy wants us to laugh at sin rather than mourn over it, to rationalize it rather than confess it and bring it to the Lord for forgiveness. Oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, we just kind of laugh, we snicker about it. When somewhere down deep, we're seared a little bit, so it has to go real deep. Somewhere down deep, we're like, maybe I ought not say that. Maybe I ought not do that. Maybe I ought not laugh at that. Maybe I'll not make it a part of my life, even if it just rears its head every once in a while. And see, the enemy is just like, look, it's okay. You can know it's bad as long as you do it. Even if it's every once in a while, it's okay. As long as you do it every once in a while, you think it's okay, I can wait until it becomes a part of who you are. You know what that's called? That's called a dagger in the chest. He has tricked us into becoming so tolerant to sin in us and around us that it no longer bothers our conscience. In Ephesians chapter 4, it says, we have become calloused. You have callous, you don't have any feelings anymore. You can put your hand to a hot little fire and it doesn't bother you anymore. And that's what sin does to the Christian. The gospel-fitted shoe, that's what I like to call it. The gospel-fitted shoe. The world has the greatest news that we can know, and that's of Jesus Christ. And we know this good news because through Jesus' death and resurrection, man can now have peace with God. The war is over because of Jesus Christ. And now the connection between God and man is because of the cross. And we are to be ready with the shoes of readiness to go wherever God leads us to share that good news of Jesus Christ. We have the answer to life's greatest questions, and that is of Jesus. And we can live for Jesus, we can talk about Jesus, we can pray to Jesus, but let me use that word again, if we ain't sharing Jesus, we're missing something. There is a piece of armor that is off. I've got this and I've got that, but you've got no feet and no shoes. And if you got no shoes, that means you're not wanting to go and travel anywhere. Isaiah 52:7 says this, how beautiful on the mountain are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who brings good tidings, who proclaims salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. May we continue what Jesus started. May we continue what Paul and Peter and James and so many more gave their lives for. May we continue to share and to show the greatest news that one could ever know. And his name is Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah that can save people's soul from damnation. We are to carry that message. And so Paul's looking at the soldier and saying, look, we need them guarded because we have to go. We have to go. Those Roman soldiers, the traveling that they did, they needed some good shoes because of the traveling and the weight that they carried. Because if they didn't have it, they weren't going to be able to go the places that they were told to go to. Same thing with the Christian. We are never more like Jesus than when we are concerned for others. He gave his life for us. Will we live for him? Shield of faith. Shield of faith is interesting because in the Greek, the word is similar to what the word big door is like. So it's a big door. Some of y'all have seen that picture of, it's not a round shield. It's the big door shield. The big door shield. You know what I'm talking about? That big door. It's just a big square. That's the word he uses here for shield. It's interesting when we're talking about the big door. It's interesting when we're talking about the shield of faith, because you say, well, guess what? We already have the breastplate. What do you need the shield for? A double portion. A double portion of it all. The shield of a warrior was big enough to cover and to protect the entire body. Why? The darts, the arrows, they come without warning. The arrows are invisible until they are buried into the man's breast, until it's deep within his chest. Sometimes you don't see it, but when you're on guard and you got that big shield, it kind of just gives you that courage that you need to stand firm. The most dangerous of temptations and the unknown circumstances are those that spring up on us unaware. They just, boom, they're there. Boom, they're there. We're going through life, and boom, they're there. Corey was getting ready to go on vacation. We're talking. He's like, I can't wait to go. We're going to go and have a good time, a quick getaway. He gets a call right before he's getting ready to go, and he finds that they think his dad has pancreatic cancer. They don't know yet. They got to test it, but the doctor says, look, I can usually tell if it is or it isn't, and I think it is. As a matter of fact, I think it may be stage 4. Arrows, unaware, just boom. And if you're not ready always with that big shield, arrows like that and others and other temptations that you're not ready for, you're just kind of living your life. You're like, just living my life. I've been to church, done this, done that. I prayed. Last time I prayed over my food a little bit. Yeah, I'm good. And all of a sudden, without warning, without anything, see, the enemy doesn't have to be seen. He doesn't have to come out like the big bad Goliath. He will stay behind the tree. Or will he come out just, and then stab you right in the back? All at once, as if a door has